The sanctuary of Maplewood Community Church fell deadly silent as I stood there, trembling, clutching that beautiful bouquet of pink peonies and white lilies to my chest. My voice, usually soft and accommodating, echoed through the speakers as I gripped the microphone in my weathered hand. "I want to thank everyone for the lovely Mother's Day service today," I began, my eyes scanning the familiar faces of neighbors and friends I'd known for decades. "But I feel I need to share something that happened this morning." I could see my son Brian shift uncomfortably in the third pew, his wife Tiffany's perfectly made-up face frozen in a mask of concern that didn't reach her eyes. They hadn't expected this. They never expected me to speak up. "My daughter-in-law gave me these flowers today," I continued, lifting the elegant arrangement slightly. "They're beautiful, aren't they? But the card—" My voice cracked, and I had to breathe deeply before continuing. "The card reads, 'The last flowers before the nursing home.'" Gasps rippled through the congregation. Pastor Richard stepped forward as if to intervene, but something in my expression must have stopped him. I wasn't finished. For 3 years since Henry passed, I've endured subtle cruelties, comments about my memory when I forget small things, whispers about my competence when I'm not in the room. But today, on Mother's Day, the mask finally slipped. From my peripheral vision, I could see Tiffany whispering frantically to Brian, her manicured hand clutching his arm. He looked confused, torn, a little boy again, despite being a successful 40-year-old architect. "I'm 65 years old," I declared, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I live independently in the home where I raised my son. I volunteer twice a week at the library. I balance my own checkbook. I am not ready for a nursing home, and I will not be bullied or manipulated." The words poured out of me like a dam breaking. Years of silent suffering finally finding voice. From the second row, Margaret Wilson, my neighbor of 20 years, nodded encouragingly, her eyes wide with shock at what I was revealing. And my son." I turned to face Brian directly now, watching him shrink under my gaze, "has stood by and allowed this to happen, has enabled it, has chosen not to see." I saw something crumble in Brian's expression then. Perhaps the comfortable fiction he'd built around his marriage, or maybe the image of the dutiful son he believed himself to be. Tiffany stood abruptly. "Eleanor is clearly having an episode," she announced to the congregation, her voice honey-sweet with practiced concern. "We've been worried about her cognitive state for months. This outburst just confirms what the family has been privately struggling with." The room erupted in murmurs. I watched as doubt clouded the faces of people who had known me for years. How quickly they were willing to believe I was losing my mind, rather than believe a younger, more polished woman could be cruel. Pastor Richard finally stepped forward, taking the microphone gently from my hand. "I think we all need to take a moment to reflect and pray," he said diplomatically. "Family matters are complex, and Mother's Day can bring up many emotions." As I stepped down from the podium, legs shaking, I noticed something unexpected. 3 people in the congregation weren't looking at me with pity or judgment. They were watching Tiffany with narrow, knowing eyes. Had they seen through her before I had? Had they experienced something similar? I returned to my seat alone, the disputed flowers still clutched in my hands. Brian and Tiffany had already slipped out a side door, no doubt to control the narrative before I could say anything more. As the closing hymn began, a folded note appeared in my hymnal, passed down the pew. I opened it discreetly. "Meet me at Maple Street Cafe tomorrow at 10. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. Diana from the choir." I tucked the note into my purse as the congregation rose to sing. For the first time in years, despite the public spectacle I'd just created, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Hope. The Maple Street Cafe was busier than I expected for a Monday morning. I arrived early, my nerves making it impossible to sit quietly at home. The aftermath of yesterday's church confrontation had been brutal. 3 voicemails from Brian, each more distressed than the last, culminating in a final message where Tiffany's voice could be heard coaching him in the background. "Tell her she embarrassed the entire family," she had hissed. Not realizing how clearly her voice carried, I hadn't called back. "Eleanor?" I looked up to see a woman in her early 50s standing beside my table. She had warm brown eyes and silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. I recognized her from the church choir, but couldn't recall ever having a conversation with her. "Diana?" I asked, and she nodded, sliding into the seat across from me. "What you did yesterday was incredibly brave," she said, without preamble, keeping her voice low, and unfortunately, familiar. She ordered coffee for both of us, and then told me her story. Her mother-in-law had been systematically isolated, gaslighted, and eventually forced into an assisted living facility despite being fully capable of independence. They had manipulated her into signing over her house before she died. Alone and confused, 6 months later. "I didn't see it happening until it was too late," Diana said, guilt etched into the lines around her eyes. "By the time I realized what my husband and his sister were doing, Mom was already gone." My hands trembled slightly around my coffee cup. "How did you know this was happening to me?" "The signs," she replied simply. "The way Tiffany always speaks for you at church functions. How she interrupts when you're talking. The comments about your memory that she laughs off as jokes. And the way your son never contradicts her." I felt my face grow hot with shame. Had everyone seen what was happening except me? "There's a group," Diana continued, sliding a simple business card across the table. It read, "Dignity at Any Age," with an address in nearby Hillsborough. "We meet on Thursday evenings. It started as a support group for elderly folks experiencing abuse, but it's become more than that. There's resources, legal advice, people who understand. I don't know if I need—" I began, but Diana cut me off gently. "Eleanor, have you checked your mail today?" I shook my head. "You might want to before you decide." She gave me a meaningful look. "And you might want to consider changing your locks." We finished our coffee, and Diana left first. I lingered, my mind racing. Brian had a key to my house. He'd insisted after Henry died. Just in case. Tiffany had one too. I'd never thought to question it. When I arrived home, my suspicions were confirmed. My usually neat stack of mail had been rifled through on the hall table. The envelope from my bank was open, its contents missing. And there, placed prominently in the center of my dining room table, was a glossy brochure for Golden Sunset Assisted Living. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. Last week, Brian had asked me to sign some papers related to my medical power of attorney. I'd signed without reading carefully. My own son, whom I trusted with my life. What had I actually signed? My phone rang, making me jump. Tiffany's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as her saccharine voice filled my kitchen. "Eleanor, I just want to check on you after your episode yesterday. Brian and I are so concerned. We've spoken with Dr. Morris, and he agrees that some evaluations might be in order. Nothing to worry about, just routine cognitive tests that everyone should have at your age. Brian will pick you up Wednesday morning at 9. No need to call back. It's all arranged." The voicemail ended with a click that sounded like a prison door closing. I stared at the phone, ice forming in my veins. Dr. Morris was Tiffany's mother's doctor, not mine. I'd never met him. And routine cognitive tests? There was nothing routine about being ambushed like this. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number on Diana's card. A warm female voice answered on the second ring. "Dignity at Any Age. This is Greta speaking." "My name is Eleanor Mitchell," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I need help. Today." By sunset, I had a locksmith changing my locks, an appointment with a lawyer specializing in elder rights, and the promise of a safe place to sleep if things escalated. Greta had listened to my story without interruption, then sprung into efficient action. That night, as I sat alone in my kitchen, my phone lit up with texts from Brian. "Mom, why aren't you answering your phone? Tiffany said you hung up on her. Mom, we're trying to help you. I'm coming over tomorrow morning." The last message sent a chill through me, but for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I took a deep breath and typed a reply. "Brian, I need space right now. Do not come to my house tomorrow. I've changed my locks for my own protection. If you respect me as your mother, You'll give me the time I'm asking for. His response came instantly. This just proves you're not thinking clearly. We'll discuss this tomorrow. I turned off my phone and placed it in a drawer. From the living room shelf, I took down the leather-bound photo album from when Brian was small. Page after page showed a happy, sensitive boy who had looked at me with such trust. Somewhere along the way, that boy had become a man who couldn't or wouldn't see what was happening right in front of him. Outside, a spring thunderstorm rolled in, rain lashing against the windows of the home Henry and I had built together 40 years ago. The home they wanted to take from me. Not without a fight, I whispered to the empty room, surprised by the fierceness in my voice. It sounded like someone I used to be, long ago, someone I needed to become again. The pounding on my front door started at 8:37 the next morning. I'd been awake since 5, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea that had long gone cold, waiting. "Mom, open the door!" Brian's voice carried easily through the house. I took a deep breath and walked deliberately to the entryway, stopping a few feet from the door. "I told you not to come, Brian," I called through the locked door. "I need space. You're being ridiculous. Open the door or I'll use my key." "Your key won't work." I changed the locks. There was a moment of stunned silence, then the sound of a key frantically being jammed into the lock, followed by muttered curses. "Why would you do that?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Mom, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." "You're right," I replied, feeling strangely calm. "This isn't like me." "The me you're used to would have gotten in your car this morning for those cognitive tests you and Tiffany arranged without my knowledge or consent. The me you're used to would have smiled and thanked Tiffany for those flowers with that cruel message. But I'm changing, Brian. I'm remembering who I was before I became afraid of upsetting everyone. Is someone in there with you? Has someone been filling your head with ideas?" His voice was rising, a note of panic creeping in. "Mom, Dr. Morris is expecting us. We need to go." "Dr. Morris is not my doctor," I replied firmly. "I saw Dr. Lawson last month for my annual checkup. She said I'm in excellent health for a woman of 65. If you'd like to speak with her, I can give you her number." Another silence. Longer this time. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He'd forgotten about my regular doctor. Or more likely, Tiffany had convinced him that I needed to see someone better. "Mom, please." His voice softened, taking on the cajoling tone he'd used as a teenager when he wanted something. "We're worried about you. That scene at church was embarrassing for everyone. Just come out so we can talk face to face." "Is Tiffany with you?" A hesitation. "She's in the car." "Then we're not talking face to face, are we? Because this isn't just between us. It never has been." I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "Brian, I have an appointment later today. I need to get ready." "What appointment? Where are you going?" The panic was back in his voice. "That's my business," I replied. "I'm still an independent adult, despite what you and your wife might think." "This isn't over, Mom." His voice had hardened. "We'll be back with proper help." "If by proper help you mean trying to have me committed or declared incompetent, you should know that I've already contacted a lawyer." My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it through the door. "I suggest you think very carefully about your next steps." I heard him walk heavily down the porch steps. Through the side window, I watched him get into his car where Tiffany sat in the passenger seat, her face a storm cloud. They appeared to argue briefly before driving away. My legs gave out then, and I sank to the floor in my entryway, shaking uncontrollably. I'd stood up to my son for the first time in years. The victory felt hollow and terrifying. 2 hours later, I sat in the clean, modest office of Sandra Boyd, the elder law attorney Greta had recommended. She was perhaps 50, with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I found immediately reassuring. "So, they've been pushing the idea of assisted living, despite your good health and independence?" she asked, making notes on a yellow legal pad. I nodded. "And I'm worried about what I might have signed last week. Brian said it was an update to my medical power of attorney, but now I'm not sure." Sandra's expression darkened. "We'll get copies of everything. First thing, we need to revoke any existing powers of attorney, medical, financial, everything. Then we'll do a full review of your assets. My house, I said quietly. I think they want my house. It's not uncommon, she replied, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact, especially in neighborhoods like Maplewood, where property values have tripled in the last decade. Do you have a mortgage? No. Henry and I paid it off 15 years ago. Good. That simplifies things. She made another note. Mrs. Mitchell. Eleanor, please. Eleanor, I want to be clear about something. What you're describing, the isolation, the gaslighting about your mental state, the attempts to control your medical care and finances, these are all forms of elder abuse. The word abuse hung in the air between us. I'd never applied it to my own situation before. Abuse happened to other people, not to retired school teachers living in nice neighborhoods. But he's my son, I whispered, tears threatening for the first time that day. I raised him better than this. Sandra's eyes softened. In my experience, it's rarely just about the money. There's usually complex family dynamics at play. Your son might be under tremendous pressure from his wife, or he might genuinely believe he's acting in your best interest. People can rationalize all kinds of behavior when they convince themselves it's for someone else's good. I thought about Brian's face at church, the confusion and shame that had flickered there when I spoke up. Perhaps he wasn't the villain of this story, but he wasn't the hero either. What do we do now? I asked, straightening my shoulders. Now, we protect you, Sandra replied, sliding several forms across her desk. And we gather evidence. Every text, every voicemail, every suggestion about assisted living. Document everything. By the time I left Sandra's office, I had a new medical power of attorney naming my old friend Margaret Wilson, legal papers explicitly revoking any financial authorities I might have unknowingly granted, and a letter formally requesting copies of any recent documents I'd signed. That evening, as I watered the rose bushes Henry and I had planted together in our small backyard, my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Morris. The voice was smooth, professional. I understand you missed our appointment today. Your son and daughter-in-law are very concerned. I set down my watering can deliberately. Dr. Morris, I have no appointment with you. I have never met you. I have my own physician of 15 years, Dr. Lawson. Yes, well, he cleared his throat. Sometimes as we age, it's beneficial to see specialists. Your family is worried about cognitive decline, which is perfectly natural at your... Did my family mention that I still substitute teach 3 days a month? Or that I volunteer teaching English to new immigrants? Or that I balance my own finances and maintain my own home? My voice was calm, steady. Did they happen to mention that my regular doctor gave me a clean bill of health 4 weeks ago? There was an uncomfortable pause. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm simply trying to help. No, Dr. Morris, you're trying to help my daughter-in-law gain control of my assets by declaring me incompetent. I surprised myself with the steel in my voice. I suggest you review your medical ethics before becoming further involved in this situation. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I slept better than I had in months, despite the storm clouds gathering on my horizon. Tomorrow would bring the first meeting of the support group Diana had recommended. I wasn't sure what to expect, but for the first time since Henry died, I didn't feel utterly alone. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself thinking about the garden center downtown. Perhaps it was time to plant something new in my garden, something with thorns. Before we continue, we want to know more about you. Where are you watching or listening from? Leave us a comment with the name of your city or country. We'd love to know how far our stories are reaching. The Hillsborough Community Center was a modest brick building with a well-tended garden surrounding its entrance. As I walked through the doors on Thursday evening, clutching my purse with nervous fingers, I wasn't sure what to expect. The past 2 days had been eerily quiet. No calls from Brian, no surprise visits. The silence felt more threatening than confrontation. You must be Eleanor, said a tall, silver-haired woman, approaching me with an outstretched hand. Diana mentioned you'd be joining us. I'm Greta, Her handshake was firm, her blue eyes sharp and assessing. I guess she was in her 70s, but she moved with the confidence and vigor of someone much younger. Thank you for taking my call the other day, I said, suddenly feeling shy. I'm not sure I'm in the right place. My situation isn't as severe as what? Greta raised an eyebrow. As being manipulated into giving up your independence? As having your mental competence questioned when there's nothing wrong with you? As being bullied by family members who should be supporting you? She shook her head firmly. You're exactly where you need to be. She led me into a room where about 15 people sat in a circle of chairs. Most were older, though a few appeared to be in their 40s or 50s. Diana waved from across the circle. Everyone, Greta announced. This is Eleanor Mitchell, who's joining us for the first time tonight. There were warm smiles and nods of welcome. No pity, I noticed with relief. Just recognition. Would you like to share why you're here? Greta asked gently. Only if you feel comfortable. I hadn't planned to speak, but once I started, the words tumbled out. The years of subtle undermining. Henry's death and my increasing isolation. Tiffany's manipulations and Brian's blind enabling. The Mother's Day flowers and their cruel message. My public stand at church and everything that had followed. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, an elegantly dressed man in his 80s spoke up. My son tried to sell my house out from under me while I was on a cruise, had the papers all drawn up, ready for me to sign when I got back, called it downsizing for my own good. He gave a wry smile. I fired him as my financial advisor and hired his competitor. Haven't spoken to him in 2 years. A woman about my age nodded. My daughter tried to convince me I was forgetting conversations we never had. Turns out she wanted access to my savings to bail out her husband's failing business. Story after story poured forth, each one a variation on the same theme: manipulation, gaslighting, isolation, financial exploitation. Some had happy endings. Some were still in progress. All were told with a clarity and strength that gave me hope. What we're doing here, Greta explained when the sharing wound down, is reclaiming our power. Aging doesn't mean surrendering your autonomy. It doesn't mean your wishes matter less or your judgment is automatically impaired. She handed out folders to all of us. Mine contained information on legal resources, contact information for reputable home health services, tips for documenting concerning behavior, and, surprisingly, flyers for various classes and workshops held at the center. Independence isn't just about legal protections, Greta continued. It's about strengthening your connections outside of toxic relationships, building a life that's so full, so rich with purpose, that no one can make you believe you're diminished. After the formal meeting ended, people lingered, chatting in small groups. I found myself drawn into a conversation with a retired judge named Howard and a former nurse named Lillian. The isolation is the most dangerous part, Lillian was saying. Once they've cut you off from friends, church, community, that's when you're most vulnerable. Exactly why my son and his wife kept suggesting I move to that retirement community in Arizona. Howard nodded. 3 states away from everyone I know. No thank you. Has anyone heard from Brian? Diana asked, joining our circle. I shook my head. Nothing since Tuesday morning. It's strange. I expected more pushback. They're regrouping, Howard said grimly. Planning their next move. You should be extra vigilant. And you should come to the cognitive health screening at Portland General next week, Lillian added. It's free for seniors, completely confidential, and conducted by independent neurologists. Having recent documentation of your cognitive health could be crucial if they try to challenge your competence. I made a note in my planner, feeling a strange mix of dread and determination. This wasn't how I'd imagined spending my retirement years, defending my sanity and independence against my own family. But I was finding resources and allies I never knew existed. As the evening wound down, Greta approached me again. There's a gardening workshop starting next week, she said. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 hours in the morning. We're focusing on native plants and sustainable landscaping. She tilted her head. Diana mentioned you used to be quite the gardener. Henry and I both were, I admitted, feeling a pang of nostalgia. Our backyard was featured in the neighborhood garden tour 3 years running. After he died, I let a lot of it go. It felt pointless, somehow. Purpose is what they try to strip from us first, Greta said quietly. Finding it again is the most powerful act of resistance. She pressed a flyer into my hand. Just think about it. On the drive home, my mind whirled with everything I'd heard and learned. I felt less alone, but more convinced than ever that my situation was genuinely dangerous. These weren't paranoid imaginings. They were recognizable patterns, familiar to everyone in that room. As I pulled into my driveway, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My porch light was on, though I distinctly remembered turning it off before leaving. I sat in my car, debating whether to call the police, when my front door opened. Brian stepped onto the porch, his face haggard in the yellow light. I took a deep breath and got out of my car. Clutching my purse, where I'd stored the small voice recorder Sandra had suggested I carry at all times. "How did you get in?" I asked, stopping at the foot of the porch steps. He held up a key. I had a copy made months ago. "Just in case." The violation hit me like a physical blow. "So you broke into my home after I explicitly told you I wanted space." "It's not breaking in when it's your mother's house," he insisted, sounding eerily like his father when Henry was being stubborn. "We need to talk, Mom. Really talk, without Tiffany here." I hesitated, then nodded. "We can sit on the porch. It's chilly out. Let's go inside." "The porch," I repeated firmly. "Or not at all." He looked like he might argue, then sank onto the porch swing, with a sigh. I sat in the wicker chair across from him, keeping my distance. "What happened to you, Mom?" he asked, his voice genuinely bewildered. "You were never like this before. Suspicious, combative, changing locks and hiring lawyers." "What happened to me?" I echoed, incredulous. "Your wife gave me flowers with a note saying they were my last before being put in a nursing home. You arranged medical tests without my consent. You made a copy of my house key without permission. And you think I'm the one who changed?" Brian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his teenage self that my heart ached. "Tiffany's just concerned about you living alone. We both are. After Dad died, you were so lost, so fragile." "I was grieving," I corrected him. "There's a difference. And yes, that first year was hard. But I've built a life without Henry. A good life. By yourself in this big old house, rattling around with all these memories. Wouldn't it be better to be somewhere with people your own age? With medical care right there, if you need it?" I studied my son's face, trying to see if he truly believed what he was saying, or if this was a script Tiffany had prepared. Brian," I said gently, "this house is paid for. I have friends here. I volunteer. I'm active in the community. Why would I give all that up to live in an institution that would drain my savings in a matter of years?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Is that what this is about? The money? Because we don't—" "Stop." My voice was sharper than I intended. "This is about respect, about recognizing that I am still capable of making my own decisions, about acknowledging that I don't need to be managed or controlled." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Tiffany says you're showing classic signs of early dementia, the paranoia, the sudden changes in behavior. And what does your wife know about dementia diagnostics?" I asked. "Is she a geriatric specialist I don't know about?" "Her aunt had it," he mumbled. "She says she recognizes the signs." I leaned forward. "Brian, look at me." Reluctantly, he raised his eyes to mine. "Next week, I'm getting a full cognitive workup at Portland General. If it shows any cause for concern, I promise we'll discuss appropriate next steps. But if, as I expect, it shows I'm perfectly sound, I want your promise that you and Tiffany will back off completely." He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. This had never been about my well-being. There was something else at stake. "What's the rush, Brian?" I asked quietly. "Why the sudden urgency to get me out of my house right now?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like elder abuse." His head snapped up. "That's ridiculous. I would never, not alone, maybe, but with Tiffany pushing, with whatever financial pressure you two are under. I watched his face carefully. Is it the business? I know your last project went over budget. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Direct hit. It's temporary, he said stiffly. The market's just tight right now. So tight you need to liquidate your mother's assets. He stood abruptly. This conversation is over. You're clearly not in a rational state of mind. As he stalked to his car, I called after him. I meant what I said about the cognitive screening, Brian. I'll text you the results. He didn't look back, just got in his car and drove away, tires squealing slightly on the quiet suburban street. I sat on my porch for a long time after he left, watching the stars emerge in the spring sky. Tomorrow, I'd call a locksmith again. Tomorrow, I'd tell Sandra about Brian's copied key and his unannounced visit. But tonight, strangely, I felt a flicker of hope. Beneath his defensiveness and Tiffany's manipulation, I'd glimpsed my real son, confused, financially stressed, perhaps genuinely worried about me in his misguided way. Not a monster, just a flawed man making terrible choices. If I could protect myself adequately, maybe there was still a chance to save our relationship. Not now, but someday. I went inside and locked the door behind me, then picked up the gardening flyer Greta had given me. Native plants, sustainable landscaping, life emerging from the soil again. For the first time since that awful Mother's Day, I smiled genuinely. Perhaps it was time to get my hands dirty again. The weeks that followed brought unexpected blooms in my life, much like the resilient perennials now thriving in the garden beds I'd reclaimed from neglect. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, I drove to Hillsborough for Greta's gardening workshop, returning home with dirt under my fingernails and a lightness in my spirit I hadn't felt in years. The cognitive assessment at Portland General had gone exactly as I'd expected. Dr. Nadine Wong, a neurologist with no connection to Brian or Tiffany, had administered a comprehensive battery of tests. Mrs. Mitchell, she had said, reviewing my results, your cognitive function is well above average for your age group. Your memory, problem-solving skills, and verbal reasoning are excellent. I see absolutely no evidence of dementia or cognitive impairment of any kind. I'd asked for the results in writing, which Sandra advised me to keep copies of in multiple locations. I sent one copy to Brian as promised, along with a brief message. As discussed, I expect you and Tiffany to respect my independence going forward. He hadn't responded. June arrived, bringing warm sunshine and longer days. At Greta's suggestion, I joined a creative writing group that met at the community center on Monday evenings. To my surprise, I discovered a talent for memoir writing that had lain dormant throughout my teaching career. "Ah, you have a powerful voice, Eleanor," said Martin, our workshop leader, after I'd shared a piece about teaching immigrant children in the 1980s. "Your experiences matter. Your perspective matters." The words had brought unexpected tears to my eyes. When had I started believing that my voice didn't matter, that my needs and wants were secondary to everyone else's comfort? Diana had become a true friend, often joining me for coffee after church on Sundays. The congregation's reaction to my Mother's Day outburst had been mixed. Some, like Margaret and Pastor Richard, had rallied around me with quiet support. Others seemed uncertain, their greetings polite but wary. A few, clearly influenced by Tiffany's version of events, avoided me entirely. "Let them think what they want," Diana said when I mentioned feeling ostracized. "The truth has a way of revealing itself eventually." July brought a heat wave and an unexpected development. Lillian from the support group called one evening, her voice tight with urgency. "Eleanor, are you planning to sell your house?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Of course not. Why would you ask that?" "Because a friend of mine is a real estate agent. She just saw a listing profile being prepared for a property on Maple Lane that matches your address. It's not public yet, but it's in the system." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I haven't contacted any realtors." "I thought as much," Lillian sighed. "My friend says the listing agent is someone named Carter Reynolds. Does that name mean anything to you?" It didn't, but a quick internet search revealed that Carter Reynolds worked for Portland Premier Properties, and his profile picture showed him with his arm around Tiffany at what appeared to be a company Christmas party. "They're college friends," I told Sandra when I met with her the next day, showing her the screenshot I'd taken. "She's a part-time stager for his agency. They're planning to sell my house, and I don't even know how they think they can do it." Sandra's expression was grave. "There are a few possibilities, none of them good. They might have forged your signature on listing documents. Or Brian might have some old power of attorney document he's trying to leverage. Or what?" I prompted when she hesitated. "Or they're planning to have you declared incompetent very soon, and they're getting everything lined up for a quick sale once they have control of your assets." Despite the summer heat, I felt ice cold. Can they do that? Even with the cognitive assessment? It's much harder with that documentation, but not impossible if they find a sympathetic judge and doctor. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "We need to be proactive. I'm going to file an emergency injunction preventing any sale of your property without court approval. And I think it's time to formally document the pattern of elder abuse." The next week passed in a blur of legal appointments and strategy sessions. Sandra helped me compile a comprehensive file. The Mother's Day card with its threatening message, transcripts of voicemails, statements from Diana and others who had witnessed Tiffany's controlling behavior, my cognitive assessment results, and the evidence of the planned secret property listing. "Keep this somewhere safe, but not in your house," Sandra advised, handing me a sealed envelope containing copies of everything. "And Eleanor, I think you should consider installing security cameras." I did more than that. With Howard's help, the retired judge from my support group, I set up a complete home security system, including cameras that uploaded directly to cloud storage I could access from anywhere. It felt strange, turning my beloved home into a fortress, but also empowering. It was the last Wednesday in July when I discovered the emails. I'd been cleaning out Henry's old desk, finally ready to sort through his things after 3 years, when I found a folder containing printouts of household documents. Amid the insurance policies and warranty information was a stack of emails Brian had printed for his father years ago, regarding some home renovation work. What caught my eye was the email address, Brian, Mitchell Portland, ARC.com. My son rarely used his work email for personal matters. On a hunch, I checked my own email archives, searching for any messages from that address. There it was, an email from 3 months ago that I'd overlooked entirely. "Mom, attached is the medical proxy update I mentioned. Please sign and return ASAP. Dr. Morris needs it before your appointment next month. Brian." The attachment was still there, unopened. With trembling fingers, I downloaded and read it. It wasn't a medical proxy update. It was a complete, durable power of attorney document giving Brian full control over all my assets, including explicit authorization to sell my home and manage the proceeds in my best interest. I hadn't signed it, thank God. I'd simply forgotten about the email entirely, a genuine senior moment that, ironically, had protected me from their scheme. But what else had been happening behind my back? On an impulse, I drove to Brian and Tiffany's house the next day. I knew their routine. Thursday was Tiffany's Pilates class, and Brian would be at work. Their housekeeper, Maria, had always been fond of me. "Mrs. Mitchell," Maria exclaimed when she answered the door. "What a surprise! Mr. Brian and Mrs. Tiffany aren't home." "I know, dear," I said with a warm smile. "I just realized I left some family photo albums here last Christmas. Brian's birthday is coming up, and I wanted to find some childhood pictures for a surprise album." Maria hesitated only briefly before letting me in. "They should be in the guest room closet, I think. Mrs. Tiffany had me store some boxes there." The guest room had once been my refuge when I stayed over to babysit their dogs when they traveled. Now it felt like enemy territory. In the closet, I found several banker's boxes labeled Eleanor, personal, my personal documents, in their house, without my knowledge or permission. "Maria, would you mind making me a cup of tea?" I called out. "I might be a while looking through these photos." As soon as she headed downstairs, I began quickly scanning through the contents, birth certificates, my marriage license, property deeds. And there, in a folder labeled Portland Properties, was a complete dossier on my house, market assessments, comparable sales in the neighborhood, and a handwritten note in Tiffany's elegant script. Potential profit after renovations, $850K. Timeline, August listing if POA secured by July. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the folder. August. They were planning to make their move in August, just days away. I quickly took photos of the most damning documents with my phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. By the time Maria returned with tea, I was sitting on the guest bed with a photo album open on my lap, the picture of an innocent mother planning a birthday surprise. "Found them," I said brightly. "Thank you so much for your help, Maria. I won't keep you from your work any longer." I drove straight to Sandra's office, my heart pounding. She reviewed the photos with increasing alarm. "This is blatant," she said finally. "Absolutely blatant. And frankly, criminal." She looked up at me, her expression grave. "Eleanor, we need to move quickly. I'm going to file for a temporary restraining order against both Brian and Tiffany, and we should consider bringing in law enforcement." The thought of my own son facing criminal charges made my stomach clench. "Isn't there another way?" Sandra's expression softened slightly. "Let's start with the restraining order and the injunction against selling your property. That gives us leverage. Maybe Brian will come to his senses when he realizes how serious this has become." But as I drove home that evening, a new worry gnawed at me. If their plan was set for August, and they realized I was actively fighting back, would they accelerate their timeline? Would they become desperate? I called Greta from my car. "I need a safe place to stay," I said without preamble. "Just for a few days, until the legal protections are in place." "My guest room is yours," she replied without hesitation. "Pack a bag and come straight here." I made a quick stop at home to gather essentials, then drove to Greta's comfortable bungalow on the outskirts of Hillsborough. That night, as we sat on her back porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, I felt a curious mix of sorrow and strength. "I keep asking myself where I went wrong with Brian," I confessed. "Was I too permissive? Did I fail to teach him empathy?" Greta shook her head firmly. "This isn't about your parenting, Eleanor. It's about choices he's making as an adult. And frankly, from everything you've told me, Tiffany is the primary architect of this scheme. Brian may be weak for going along with it, but that's not a reflection on you. I just keep thinking about the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was sad, who built me dandelion bouquets and macaroni necklaces." My voice caught. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him for this." "Maybe you won't have to," Greta said quietly. "Maybe, when confronted with the legal consequences of his actions, he'll find his way back to being the son you raised." I wanted desperately to believe her, but as I lay awake in her guest room that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the final confrontation was still to come, and that it would change my relationship with my son forever, one way or another. What I didn't know then was how soon that confrontation would arrive, or that it would come on the most festive night of the year in the Mitchell family, Christmas Eve. By December, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined that fateful Mother's Day. The garden workshops had led to a community project, restoring native plantings in a local park. My writing group had published a small anthology of senior stories, including my piece about standing up to Brian and Tiffany. Most importantly, I had built a network of friends who saw me, truly saw me, as a vibrant, capable woman with value beyond my role as someone's mother or widow. The legal battles had been swift and decisive. Sandra's injunction had immediately halted any attempt to sell my home. The restraining order against Brian and Tiffany had given me breathing room to strengthen my position. When presented with the evidence we'd gathered, the district attorney had agreed that criminal charges of attempted fraud and elder abuse were warranted. But I couldn't bring myself to press those charges, not against my own son. Instead, we'd reached an uneasy settlement. Brian and Tiffany agreed to mandatory counseling and financial transparency. Brian surrendered all copies of my house keys and signed legal documents, acknowledging he had no authority over my medical or financial decisions. In return, I didn't pursue criminal prosecution. There had been no real reconciliation, though. Our only communication since July had been through lawyers. The ache of that estrangement followed me even through the joy of my newfound independence, which was why the text I received on December 23rd caught me completely off guard. Mom, I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? Just the two of us. Tomorrow afternoon, before you go to the community center Christmas party. I'll understand if you say no. I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. 3 to 4 p.m. At my house. The security cameras will be on. His reply came instantly. Thank you. I spent a restless night wondering what he wanted. Was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation? Or another manipulation? I'd learned the hard way not to trust easily, even with my own son. The next day, I prepared carefully for his visit. I baked Henry's special Christmas cookies, Brian's childhood favorite, but I also made sure Diana and Sandra knew about the meeting. I wore a comfortable sweater in Christmas red, but I also had my phone recorder ready in my pocket. Hope and caution, the twin companions of my new life. At precisely 3 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I could see Brian standing alone on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot like he used to do as a boy when he knew he was in trouble. I opened the door but didn't immediately invite him in. Thank you for seeing me, he said, his voice rough. I noticed with shock how much he'd aged in the months since our confrontation. New lines around his eyes, a certain gauntness to his face. You said you wanted to talk, I replied, neither warm nor cold. So let's talk. I led him into the living room where I'd decorated a small Christmas tree, my first since Henry died. Brian's eyes lingered on the ornaments, many of which he had made as a child. You kept those, he said softly. Of course I did. I sat in my favorite armchair, leaving him the couch. What did you want to discuss, Brian? He sat heavily, hands clasped between his knees. I wanted to give you this first, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket and placing it on the coffee table between us. I didn't reach for it. What is it? Divorce papers. His voice cracked on the word. Tiffany and I are splitting up. It's been coming for a while, but what happened with you? It forced me to see things I'd been ignoring for years. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart was racing. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever Tiffany had done, divorce was painful. No, you're not, he said with a bitter laugh. And you shouldn't be. She was awful to you. And I was worse, because I should have protected you. The raw honesty in his voice made my carefully constructed walls waver slightly. Why are you telling me this? I asked. He took a deep breath. Because I owe you the truth, the complete truth, about everything. For the next hour, Brian talked more openly than he had in years, about how Tiffany had always been manipulative, but he'd been too infatuated to see it. About how his architecture firm had been struggling financially after taking on a project that went dramatically over budget. About Tiffany's expensive tastes and mounting credit card debt. When Dad died, she started dropping hints about how valuable this house would be if we sold it. He admitted, unable to meet my eyes, said it was too much for you to manage alone, that you'd be happier somewhere smaller, with less maintenance. And you believed her? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. I believed what I wanted to believe, he said quietly, that we could solve our financial problems and help you at the same time. It was convenient, comfortable. I didn't have to face the reality that we were trying to take advantage of you. He explained how the plan had evolved, from gentle suggestions about downsizing to active manipulation, from casual comments about my memory to a coordinated campaign to have me declared incompetent. The Mother's Day card was Tiffany's idea, he said, his voice hollow. She thought if she could make you emotional, make you seem unstable, it would be easier to convince people you needed supervision. But you went along with it, I pointed out. You were willing to put your own mother in a nursing home against her will, to sell her home out from under her, all to bail yourself out of financial trouble. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Yes, he whispered. I was. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for that. Why the change of heart now? I asked, still wary. Brian finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. When the restraining order came through, when I realized we might face criminal charges, I had to confront what we'd become, what I'd become. He swallowed hard. I went to therapy, real therapy, not just the mandated sessions. Started looking at why I'd let Tiffany control so much of my life, why I was willing to hurt the people I love for money. He gestured vaguely around him. This house, it's not just property. It's where I grew up, where Dad taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, where you helped me with my college applications at the kitchen table. How could I have ever thought it was okay to take that from you? I felt tears threatening, but held them back. This was not the moment to soften completely. What are you asking for, Brian? Forgiveness? He shook his head. I have no right to ask for that. I just wanted you to know the truth, and that I'm trying to be better, to be the son you deserve. He hesitated, then added, and to give you this. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. This time, I did take it. Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a blooming rose. I remembered how you and Dad used to garden together, he said softly. How the roses were always your favorite. Diana told me you've started gardening again, that you're leading workshops now. I touched the pendant gently. You've spoken to Diana? He nodded. I reached out to her last month. Wanted to know how you were doing since I couldn't ask you directly. She agreed to meet me for coffee, though she made it very clear she was on your side. A small smile touched his lips. She said you're thriving, writing, gardening, making new friends. She said you found your voice again. I have, I confirmed, feeling a surge of pride. It took your betrayal to make me remember who I was before I became just Brian's mother, or Henry's widow. He winced at the word, betrayal, but nodded. I know. And as much as I hate what I did, I'm grateful that you found your strength again. He stood slowly. I should go. You have your Christmas party tonight, and I've taken enough of your time. I rose as well, the pendant still in my hand. What will you do now? About the financial problems. Tiffany's moving to Seattle. I'm selling our house. It was always too big, too expensive. I'll start over. Rebuild my business the right way. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'm not asking to be part of your life again, Mom. I know I've lost that right, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry. As he reached for the doorknob, an unexpected impulse seized me. Brian, he turned. The community center is having a New Year's Day brunch next week, a potluck. I took a deep breath. If you wanted to come, I could introduce you to some of my friends. Hope flickered across his face, quickly tempered with caution. Are you sure? No, I answered honestly, but I'm willing to try. Small steps. He nodded, emotion making speech difficult. I'd like that, he managed finally. I'm bringing Henry's famous cranberry orange muffins, I added. You could help me bake them the day before, if you want. The tradition of New Year's Eve baking had been a family constant throughout Brian's childhood. His recognition of the olive branch I was extending was immediate, his eyes filling with tears. I'll bring the oranges, he whispered. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, the silver rose pendant cool in my palm. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination. Trust, once broken, could perhaps be rebuilt, but never exactly as it was before. Like my garden after years of neglect, any relationship with Brian would need careful tending, strong boundaries, and time to flourish. But I had discovered something important in the months since those poisoned flowers arrived on Mother's Day. I was strong enough to stand alone and wise enough to let people earn their place in my life rather than demanding my place in theirs. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Still on for the Christmas party tonight? Greta made her famous eggnog. I fastened the rose pendant around my neck and replied, absolutely. And I have quite a story to tell you. Then I went to my bedroom to change for the party. In the mirror, I saw not the frightened woman who had once received flowers with a cruel message, but someone stronger, wiser, and more genuinely herself than she had been in decades. The woman in the mirror smiled back at me, the silver rose gleaming at her throat, a symbol not of what had been taken, but of what had been reclaimed and what was still yet to bloom. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to explore more content on our channel. We have many more emotional and thought-provoking stories that, like this one, aim to inspire you and show you that there's always hope. Click on the next video and join us for another narrative that will surely captivate you from the very beginning. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your comment, and share this video with those who might need it. Thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next video.